This is the Lingo study guide for U.S. Congress and lawmaking ahead of the Congressional midterm vocabulary quiz. Act. Legislation, once it has been passed in both chambers of Congress and signed by the President or passed over President's veto, thus becoming law. An act can be referred to a bill that has been passed by one chamber and engrossed. Either chamber may adopt a simple resolution or concurrent, but these resolutions are not presented to the President and cannot be enacted into law. Adjournments in D. Adjournment without defining a day to reconvene. A session can continue into the following year, but automatically terminates at noon on January 3rd, means adjournment without a day. Adjournment to a day certain. Adjournment that specifies when the chamber will reconvene. Breaks in the congressional scheduling lasting more than 3 days. Amendment. Suggested change to the language of a bill, resolution, or another amendment. One of the several motions a lawmaker can do. An amendment to the text of a bill is a first-degree amendment. A second-degree amendment proposes to adjust the text of a first-degree amendment. May add and subtract language, or replace the entirety of a bill with text contained in the amendment in the nature of a substitute. Uses amendment tree diagrams in each chamber. Amendment in the nature of a substitute. Amendment that proposes to replace an entire text of a bill. Strikes the language that following the enacting cause and replaces it with new text. Amendment tree. Depicts the order in which amendments may be offered and voted on. Distills rules and precedents into illustrations of when and where particular kinds of amendments may be offered. Appeal. Members' challenge of ruling or decision made by the presiding officer in the chamber. A successful appeal nullifies the chair's ruling and establishes a new precedent. Appropriations bill. Provides legal authority to obtain and spend money from Treasury. 3 types: annual, supplemental, and continuing. Number of restrictions to separate funding decisions from the creation of a new policy. Authorization bill. Legislation that establishes or continues the legal operation of a federal program or agency, indefinite or for a specific time period. Bill. Legislative proposal before Congress. H.R. in House and S. in Senate. Senate in chronological order based on when they are introduced. Public bills are general questions and become public law if approved. Private bills are claims against the government, immigration and naturalization cases, land titles, and become private law if enacted. Bills introduced. Any member may join in introducing a bill or resolution. The first member is the sponsor, and others that join are considered co-sponsors. Many bills originate in committees and are reported by the chair of the committee or subcommittee. House and Senate task their leadership with making committee referrals. Budget authority. Authority to enter into obligations that will result in immediate or future outlays of federal funds. Classified as period of availability, timing of congressional action, and manner for determining the amount available, definite or indefinite. Budget resolution. Concurrent resolution to establish spend limits across various parts of the federal budget. Sets overall budgetary framework to help guide subsequent spending decisions, established in the Budget Act of 1974. Calendars. Inventories of legislative business. House has 5 calendars: discharge, union, House, private, consensus. Senate. All legislative measures reported from committee go on one calendar, the calendar of general orders. Calendar Wednesday. Committee chair or designated committee member may call certain bills to the floor on calendar Wednesday. Gives notice to the House on Tuesday of intention to call up a bill on Wednesday. Debate is limited to 2 hours. This is rarely used. A clean bill. Assembled version of all of the changes and what is left of the original bill of the new measure. Introduced as a clean bill, given a new number, and is a time saver, does not have to be individually debated, protects the committee amendments. Cloture. Formal process to end filibuster in the Senate. Can apply to any matter before the Senate. needs the signature of 16 senators to introduce a motion, must be supported by 3/5 of the entire Senate membership, 60 senators. A simple majority of senators voting is sufficient to invoke cloture on any nomination. Can be taken 2 days after a motion is made, and if cloture is invoked, the underlying bill or amendment comes into final vote after 30 additional hours of post-cloture consideration. Committees. Institutionalize units of House and Senate that prepare legislation for action and conduct oversight and investigations as directed by the parent chamber. Divided into subcommittees. Study legislation, hold hearings, and report bills to full committee. Concurrent resolution. H.con res and S.con res, abbreviations in House and Senate, must be adopted by both houses to take effect, but does not get sent to the president and does not have the force of law. Budget resolutions, adjournment of Congress, and general statement on policy issues. Conference committee. Temporary joint committee consisting of House membership and senators who are tasked with reconciling legislative differences when they pass the same bill but with different texts. These are formally appointed positions. Conference report goes to the floor and cannot be amended. Must be approved by both chambers, otherwise it goes back to the conference committee or to a new conference committee. Congressional record. Verbatim account of floor proceedings in House and Senate. There are 4 parts: House proceedings, Senate proceedings, extension of remarks, daily digest summary. Consensus calendar. List of measures co-sponsored by 290 or more members that remain unreported from committee. Direct speaker to schedule a consensus bill for debate on the floor. Continuing resolution. Legislation, typically joint resolution, continues appropriations for specific ongoing activities of the federal government when the fiscal year begins and Congress has yet to enact appropriations. Usually specifies the max rate an agency can incur obligations. Discharge calendar. Where motions to discharge committees are listed in the House, signatures of 218 members must be obtained in a discharge petition. Discharge resolutions. In the Senate, rarely used to relieve committees from its consideration of a matter before it. Earmark. Congressionally directed spending for a narrow purpose, added at the request of a member or senator to direct funding for a singular purpose. Enacting clause. Gives legal force to a bill if it becomes law. A successful motion to strike it from legislation kills the measure. Key phrase, quote, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives. Engrossed bill. Text of a bill passed by one chamber. Include language from floor amendments that were agreed on and certified by House Clerk or Secretary of the Senate. Enrolled bill. Final copy of bill that passed identical forms in both chambers. Signatures are done on parchment paper to Speaker, Senate President, and President to keep for the record. Executive calendar. Non-legislative calendar containing treaties and nominations reported from committee, one of the 5 House calendars. 5-minute rule. Debate limiting rule for the House when it operates a committee of the whole committee. Offer amendment speaks for 5 minutes in favor of the amendment, and opponent speaks for 5 minutes against it. Germane. Directly subject matter to the legislation at hand. In the House, has strict requirements to amendments and floor debates. In the Senate, the first 3 hours of debate of each day are germane pending to business. Amendments must be germane when proposed for general appropriation bills, bills considered after cloture has been invoked, or proceeding under unanimous consent agreement that established a germane requirement. Holds. Communications from senators to their party leadership. Convey scheduling concerns or policy objectives. Provide early alert systems to Senate leaders. House calendar. Inventory of legislative actions reported from House committees that do not spend money or affects tax revenue. One of the 5 House calendars. Joint resolution. H.J.res and S.J.res in House and Senate. Requires approval of both chambers and the signature of the president like a bill. Has the force of law if approved. Used to deal with limited matters. Used to propose amendments to the Constitution when 3/4 of states have ratified it. Law. Measure passed by Congress and signed by President or enacted over a presidential veto. P.L means public law, so P.L.16 Tac 1 means that it was a public law passed by the 116th Congress and was the first law passed. Legislative day. Period beginning when the House or Senate meet after an adjournment and ending when the chamber next adjourns. House adjournment is day to day. Legislative and calendar days are often the same. Senate legislative day may extend over several calendar days if the chamber chooses to recess rather than end the day. Limited tariff benefit. Provision affecting tariff payments that benefit 10 or fewer entities. Limited tax benefit. Revenue closing provision that provides federal tax deduction, credits, exclusion, or preference to 10 or fewer beneficiaries. Marking up bills. Review contents of legislation in committees and subcommittee. May lean to clean bills. Motion. Requests to initiate any wide array of parliamentary actions in the House and Senate. Often amends bills or the adjournment of the day. Motion to in Senate used to bring a bill, resolution, or conference report to the floor. Motion agreed by majority vote may require 60 vote in cloture process to reach a final vote. Most times are debatable or without debate, such as budget resolutions, reconciliation bills, or joint resolutions. 1-minute speeches. Remarks made by House members at the start of a legislative day may be about any subject, but limited to 1 minute. Outlays. Money spent in a given fiscal year. Outlays can be over several years based on one-year appropriations. Outlays happen when an agency writes a check and the check is cashed. Override a veto. When President rejects a bill and returns it to Congress with a veto message. Override takes a 2/3 supermajority vote in each chamber. Pairs. Voluntary voting agreement between lawmakers on opposite sides of an issue. If one person of a pair is missing, the member present may make a new pair. Pay-go. House requirement for any new mandatory spending be offset or paid for with increases in revenue or spending cuts elsewhere. Senate has broad pay-go requirements that apply to any spending measure. Pocket veto. Happens when President withholds approval of a bill after Congress has adjourned for the final time at the end of a yearly session. The President has 10 days excluding Sundays once they have the bill to take action. Point of order. Objection that chamber is departing from the rules governing the proceeding. Objector cites the rule violated and presiding officer renders a decision based on rule and precedents. President of the Senate. The Vice President. They rarely preside over the Senate except for ceremonial occasions or to break a tie vote. President pro tempore. Presiding officer of the Senate. President for a time is the meaning. Elected by full membership of the Senate, usually the majority member with the longest service. Previous question. Motion to move the previous question, ends debate, presents additional amendments from being offered, and brings to a final vote. Not allowed during House Committee of the Whole, but is allowed when one of its committees conducts a markup. Private calendar. In the House, private bills are claims against the government, immigration and naturalization cases, and land titles. May be called any day the House is in session. Issues are listed on the private calendar for 7 days, is one of the 5 House calendars. Privileged business. Matters with special priority for consideration. Privileged business is different in each chamber. House business is listed in Rule 14. Nearly every House floor is privileged or taken up in a privileged motion or resolution. Senate refers to a matter taken without debate. Questions of privilege. Matters affecting the rights, safety, dignity, or integrity of House and Senate proceedings or individual members. Quorum. Minimum number of members who need to be there to conduct business. Majority of members for each chamber, 218 in the House, 51 in the Senate. Committee of a whole in the House is 100 members. Reading a bill. Traditional parliamentary procedure for a bill to be read 3 times before passing. First time is conducted and printed in the Congressional Record. Second time is when floor consideration begins and the bill is read for the amendment, each section and title, in the Senate, not waived through the unanimous consent upon introduction, and intended to inform it to reference to committee. Objecting to a bill's reading prevents it from referral and places it directly on the legislative calendar. The third reading takes place when floor action has been completed on amendments. Recess does not end a legislative day and does not interrupt unfinished business. House and Senate usually adjourn day to day. Recognition. Speaker has unchallengeable right and recognition and may choose not to recognize a member. In the Senate, the presiding officer must recognize the first senator seeking the floor. Priority is granted to the majority leader in the lineup. Recommit. Motion near the end of the floor consideration to return a bill to the committee that reported it. Straight motion to recommit. Kills the bill. Speaker gives preference to the minority leaders and opposing members of the bill. Bill can be reported forthwith and amended immediately on the floor with instructions before the final vote. Reconciliation. Optional budget procedure. By adopting a budget resolution with reconciliation instructions, it directs its committee to report policy changes in accordance with the instructions. Reconsider a vote / motion to reconsider. Motion to hold a vote in abeyance so it may be taken later. Can only be made by a member who voted on the prevailing side for the question being reconsidered. In the Senate, a senator on the prevailing side or who did not vote often moves to table the motion to reconsider, so to conclude the matter without the possibility of it coming up again. House. Motion to reconsider is offered as after a measure passes and immediately tabled. Recorded vote. Votes on which each member's position is made public. In the Senate, a roll call of membership of yea, nay, or present. In the House, uses electronic voting system for recorded votes and has done so since January 1973. Report. Committee that completed its review of a bill can vote to report it to the full chamber for more action. After vote is done, committee may prepare a report explaining the legislation and actions the committee took. It is labeled as H.Rep and S.Rep in the House and Senate. Dissenting committee members can file a statement called a minority, additional or supplemental views in a report. House requires committee to reproduce reports. Senate does not require it, but is done in most cases. Resolution. House and Senate resolutions deal with the prerogatives of either House and Senate to address the rules of one House or the sentiments of the chamber. Special rules from the Rules Committee are resolutions, do not require approval from the other chamber or president, and therefore cannot become a law. Riders. Policy-oriented amendments in must-pass legislation. Riders become a law if a bill contains them is enacted, often included in appropriation bills. Rule 14. Allows a senator to place a bill or joint resolution directly on the legislative calendar without it being referred to committee. Rejects the second reading, introduced measure then can bypass committee and become eligible for floor consideration. Rules. Standing rules govern House and Senate proceedings and address matters like duties of officers, the order to conduct business, admission on the floor, parliamentary procedures for amendments and votes, and how legislative jurisdiction of committees are defined. In the House, a rule is a resolution reported by the Rules Committee to govern the handling of a particular bill on the floor. If adopted by the House, it obtains the same status as the standing rule and lapses only after action has been completed on the measure. sets a time limit of general debate, how amendments will be considered, and may waive points of order again. Provision of a bill or amendments are reported from the committee/offered on the floor. Speaker. Presiding officer of the House of Representatives. Leader of the majority in the chamber. Selected from the majority party's members and formally elected by the full House at the beginning of each new Congress. Standing vote/division vote. Non-recorded vote in the House and Senate. Members stand depending if they are for or against a measure and are counted by the presiding officer. No record of how many members voted. Only total number of votes for and against are announced. Strike the last word/request number of words. Asking for 5-minute debate on an amendment. Pro forma amendment and requires no vote and contemplates no change of text. Supplemental Appropriations Bill. Legislative to provide additional funds above what was previously provided. Provide additional budget authority to respond to unforeseen contingencies, such as natural disasters. Suspension of the rules. Time-saving procedure for passing legislation in the House. Member recognized by the Speaker, 2/3 vote is required to pass a measure through suspension. Debate is limited for 40 minutes. No freestanding amendments are allowed, and a single vote occurs to suspend the rules and pass the bill. If no 2/3 majority, bill can be considered later with alternative procedures. Any rule in the Senate may be suspended by a 2/3 vote after a day notice in writing. Table. Non-debatable in both House and Senate, and is used to reach a final adverse outcome in which the matter is directed. Special relevance in Senate because they can end debate and defeat an amendment at once. Unanimous consent. Proceedings of the House and Senate may occur on the bias of unanimous agreement provided by the Chamber, employed to expedite committee and floor action like routine matters, often used to waive the reading of an amendment or insert material on the congressional record. Unanimous consent agreement. Used in the Senate to expedite legislation. Legislative business for routine and controversial issues is conducted on the bias of unanimous consent of all senators. Prior to floor debate on major legislation, party leaders transmit requests for unanimous consent to senators seeking to negotiate a path forward. Once agreed to, these agreements are binding in the Senate unless modified by unanimous consent. Agreement may specify length of time for debate, when votes will occur, whether amendments needed to be relevant to the bill under consideration. Is the Senate's version of rules issued by the House Rules Committee for bills pending in the House. Main difference is that a single objection prevents the Senate from entering into unanimous consent agreements. Union calendar. Legislation that directly or indirectly appropriates money or offsets revenue is placed on the calendar of the House after being reported for committee. Measures on the Union calendar are debated in the Committee of the Whole, providing a more flexible amendment form for comparison of bills debated under alternative sets of procedures. One of the 5 House calendars. Veto. Disapproval by the President of a joint resolution or bill. The President has 10 days, not including Sundays, to sign or veto a bill. Otherwise, it becomes law without the President's signature. When a bill is vetoed, it returns to the Chamber of Origin with an objection message. Voice vote. Default method of voting in Congress. Answer aye or no in chorus. The presiding officer decides the result based on the volume of responses. A recorded vote may be requested after. Yeas and nays. Provides a vote by the yeas and nays if 1/5 of those present support the request. It takes 44 House members, 1/5 of 218, and 11 senators, 1/5 of 51.